About a year ago, I discovered this amazing Australian animated television series called Bluey. There's a good chance you've heard about it. For those of you who haven't, I'll give you a quick synopsis. To put it into basic terms, the show follows the adventures of a 6-year-old blue heeler dog named Bluey, along with her family and friends. As a teenager, I wasn't sure if I would enjoy a show aimed at preschoolers, but I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. Bluey is a refreshing break from all the intense and serious TV shows out there. It's light-hearted, funny, and it was incredibly relatable, too. However, a few months ago, I remember coming across a particular episode of the show, and I figured now would be a good time to get this incident off my chest. This episode that I'm about to tell you was an unreleased episode of Bluey that was never supposed to be aired. The creator of the show, Joe Brum, stated in an email that this episode would have been deemed unsuitable for children. Now you're probably wondering to yourself, if this episode was never shown to the public, then how did I manage to come across it in the first place? Well, to be completely honest, the answer to that question is so crazy that you might not believe me. It was a typical Friday afternoon and I was in my room laying on my bed, watching some of my favorite Bluey videos on YouTube. The show never failed to put me in a good mood, and I loved how relatable the characters were. Suddenly, there was a knock at my door. "Come in." I called out as the person on the other side of the door opened it and walked in. It was my dad. He was holding a small cardboard box with a confused look on his face. "Hey Lucas, a package arrived for you," he said, holding out the package. I was rather confused. "That's weird, I don't remember ordering anything." "Are you sure it's for me?" I asked. "Yeah, the package has your name on it," my dad replied. "Maybe it's a surprise from someone. Just put it on my desk," I instructed my dad. "I'll open it later." My dad nodded silently and did what I had told him, before he walked out of my room and closed the door without saying anything. I then continued watching YouTube, trying my best to forget about the mysterious package, but every time I looked at it on my desk, I was getting more and more curious as to what could possibly be inside it. Eventually, curiosity got the best of me. I cautiously got out of my bed as I slowly approached the box. You probably think I'm just making a big deal out of this whole situation, but when a package arrives for you, despite the fact that you haven't recently ordered anything, I was acting just like how anyone else would act in my current situation. I slowly opened up the box only to be met with a bunch of packing peanuts. After digging around in the packing peanuts, I then felt something that felt like a DVD case. Pulling out the source, it revealed to be a blank DVD case, no words, no barcode. It was completely blank. Confused, I took off the plastic on the case and opened it, making the disc inside drop onto the floor. I looked down to see what had just fallen out and saw a blank disc with words written in red Sharpie. When I saw what the writing said, it piqued my interest. Bluey, unreleased episode. Now I had watched every episode of Bluey multiple times and know them all by heart. But an unreleased episode? That was something I never thought I would get the chance to see. I was curious because watching an episode of my favorite show that no one else had seen before would have been a rare opportunity, but I was also skeptical because a package containing an unreleased Bluey episode doesn't just appear out of thin air. Someone must have given it to me, but who? After a lot of consideration, I eventually decided to put this disc to good use as I slowly but surely inserted the disc into my computer. I heard the computer processing the disk as I minimized my Google Chrome browser and waited for my computer to fully process the contents of the disk. Eventually, a video file appeared on my screen and I clicked on it without a second thought. Once I clicked play on the video, the Bluey intro began to play and it looked normal. I couldn't contain my excitement as I was currently watching a Bluey episode that was never supposed to be aired, but then a question entered my mind: why would this episode be unreleased in the first place? What was in this episode that was so bizarre that it was never released to the public? I was soon about to have those questions answered, but not in the way I ever could have expected. After the intro ended, the episode officially started, It began with the usual exterior view of the healer's house that was in the beginning of most episodes. The episode then cut to the living room and it showed Bandit and Chili watching TV, but something was off about the scene. It seemed to go on for about a whole minute with no music or dialogue, with the only sounds coming from the TV. I also noticed that Bandit and Chili both had bored expressions on their faces, which confused me because they are usually much more energetic. The scene then showed the outside of the healer's house, where Bluey and Bingo are running around and laughing, presumably playing a game of tag. I smiled at this because I always found their laughs to be cute. "You're never gonna catch me, Bingo," Bluey taunted, before she stuck her tongue out at her sister. "We'll see about that," Bingo replied with a mischievous smile. As Bluey and Bingo continued to run around the front yard, the camera then zoomed out to reveal a realistic white van pulling in front of the house. The van looked dented and had scratches all over it. Bluey and Bingo looked over in confusion. It then showed a close-up of the van as the window rolled down, revealing the driver of the van, which looked to be a black-colored pug with white spots on his body and around his eyes. The driver appeared to also have a small stubble. "Hey kids, would you like some candy? I have some delicious treats here," the stranger said in a voice that sounded like he had smoked a whole pack of cigarettes. "No thank you, we're fine," Bluey replied in an uncomfortable tone. "Yeah," Bingo added while nodding. "Our mom and dad said don't talk to strangers." The stranger persists, trying to convince them to come closer to the van. "Are you sure? It's really good candy. You don't want to miss out." Bluey and Bingo backed away slowly, trying to keep a safe distance from the van. "No, thank you. We don't talk to strangers," Bluey said firmly. The stranger then groaned to himself. "Very well, but can you at least check the back of my van? I think there's a dent back there." Bluey and Bingo hesitated for a moment, giving each other an unsure glance. "Okay then," Bluey replied as her and Bingo cautiously approached the back of the van and examined it closely. "I don't see anything," Bingo said to the stranger, but she received no response. "Hello?" There was a brief moment of silence as the music got more and more intense. All of a sudden, the doors to the back of the van burst open and the stranger was standing there, which scared me so much that I almost fell out of my chair. Bluey and Bingo both screamed as the stranger grabbed them and threw them into the back of the van. The scene then changed back to Bandit and Chili, who were still watching TV, when they suddenly hear Bluey and Bingo screams from outside. "What was that?" Bandit asked. "It sounded like Bluey and Bingo," Chili replied. "Something must be wrong." With that, Bandit and Chili quickly ran out of the living room and out into the front yard just in time to see the stranger drive off in the van, but before it drove around the corner, they could faintly hear the voice of Bingo shout out, "Mummy, Daddy, help us." "Oh no!" Chili cried out on the verge of tears. "Bandit, we have to call the police." The episode then showed the title card and the episode was called Stranger Danger, with pieces of candy above the text. Usually Bluey's voice would say what the episode is called, but it was dead silent, which freaked me out even more. After the title card, the episode showed a bird's-eye view shot of the van driving down the road. I then heard sad piano music playing as the scene continued. It then showed the van driving off the road and into what looked like a secluded part of a forest. The forest was dark and there was no light source. When the van came to a stop, it just froze on the van for about 30 seconds, before it cut to inside of the van, where Bluey and Bingo were tied up and knocked out unconscious as they both had bruises on their heads. I then noticed that there was a baseball bat in the background. The van's doors then opened, revealing the stranger's shadow on the van's interior walls, before the screen slowly faded to black for about 10 seconds. The scene faded back in to show a small cabin in the forest. I assumed that's where the stranger had taken Bluey and Bingo. I then heard the sound of crying as it faded to show the inside of cabin. The scene showed Bluey and Bingo, still tied up, crying as they both sat in the empty cabin. When I say empty, I really mean it. there was no furniture anywhere inside the cabin. "Bluey, I'm scared, I want Mum and Dad," Bingo said tearfully. "Me too, Bingo," Bluey replied, just as sad as she was. All of a sudden, the door of the cabin creaked open to reveal the same stranger as he had a crooked smile on his face. Bluey and Bingo turned to him with looks of worry on their faces, but just when Bluey was about to speak, the stranger walked up to her and promptly slapped her in the face. "Keep your mouth shut," the stranger shouted, "or I'll shut them for you." "But," Bingo began, before the stranger turned to her. "Don't you start," he shouted again. "There's no use screaming, no one can save you." "What are you going to do to us?" Bingo asked worriedly. The stranger then pulled out a knife and said in a deep voice, "You'll find out soon enough." Without another word, the stranger then proceeded to walk slowly towards Bluey and Bingo, who were both screaming and frantically trying to untie themselves, but was unsuccessful. They constantly begged the stranger not to hurt them, but it was no use. The stranger showed no intentions of stopping. Suddenly, I heard the sound of police sirens as I saw red and blue lights flash on the screen. Before the stranger could process what was happening, the door burst open revealing a police officer. "Everyone freeze," the police officer instructed. "Stay right where you are." Two more police officers then entered the cabin as they charged at the stranger, pinning him down and putting him in handcuffs, while the other police officer ran up towards Bluey and Bingo. "Are you kids okay?" the police officer asked frantically, kneeling down to them. "Yeah, we're okay," Bluey replied, still a bit shaken up from the events. "Thanks for saving us, mister," Bingo said gratefully as the police officer smiled. "It's all in a day's work," he said as he then proceeded to untie the two young healers. "Now let's get you back to your parents." The scene then showed the aftermath, with the stranger being escorted to one of the police cars that surrounded the cabin, whilst in handcuffs, as Bluey and Bingo were both led out of the cabin by the police officer. They looked around for a while until they saw Bandit and Chili talking to another police officer with worried looks on their faces. Chili's eyes were practically bloodshot from all the tears. "Mom, Dad," Bluey and Bingo called out in unison as they both raced over to their parents. "Oh, thank goodness you girls are okay," Chili said, kneeling down and putting her hands on Bluey's shoulders. "I was worried sick about you. I missed you, Mum and Dad," Bingo cried out as she hugged them both. "We missed you too, mate," Bandit replied, returning the hug. The scene then showed the healer family hugging each other as onlookers, who had gathered around the cabin to find out what was going on, began cheering and clapping for Bluey and Bingo being reunited with their parents. The last shot of the episode was the police car that had the stranger in it driving off into the distance. The camera then panned up to show the sunset for about 5 seconds before the credits finally came on, bringing this episode to a close. Although the episode had a happy ending, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. The storyline was dark and unsettling, and I found myself questioning why the creators of the show would choose to create such a storyline. I remember feeling relieved when the episode was over, and I couldn't wait to watch a light-hearted episode to lift my spirits. Looking back on that day, I realize how powerful storytelling can be. Even a show that I loved and trusted could surprise me with an unexpected and unsettling plot. It made me realize that sometimes we need to be prepared for the unexpected, even in the things we think we know well. But the question still remained in my mind, who sent me that mysterious package in the first place?